Welcome, welcome. Maybe you could put in the chat where you are dialing in from today, please. And to let you know, this is being recorded, and we have Emma with us, who is doing signing interpretation. So we've got British Sign Language interpreter, who's Emma, who is on the call, who should be hotspotted or whatever it's called for you. I don't know what it's called, pinned at the top so that you can all see her, hopefully. All right, fantastic. Right, we will make a start. It's amazing to see you. This is very, very exciting. Right. Okay, so let's get these slides shared. Thank you. Right, welcome. For those who don't know me, I am Alex Knight. I'm the founder of STEMAZING. And STEMAZING is, if you don't know, which I'm sure you do, but it's a non-profit social enterprise dedicated to inspiration and inclusion in STEM. And our mission is to really empower and equip diverse role models to level up so they can be more confident and more visible and do really effective connection and engagement with young people to inspire a more diverse and inclusive STEM future, which is what we all want. Now, it's INWED Week, International Women in Engineering Day week. Officially, it was on the 23rd, but this whole month of June really is about celebrating engineering and particularly women in engineering, but I think STEM more broadly, because so many of us, I'm an engineer, but so many of us work across sectors that are cross-cutting and multidisciplinary in STEM. It's not just about engineering. So we are celebrating that this week, and I'm very excited to be celebrating with all of you here today. So thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited about this webinar. I've been looking forward to this. And thank you to everybody who's taking part. So all of our speakers who you will get to meet today. Thank you very much to our team in the background in STEMAZING for having created and set this up. We absolutely couldn't do it without you. And also thank you to our sponsors, Everrose and Pointer Group, who have kindly sponsored this so that we can put this webinar on. And it's amazing to have your support. You are just so supportive of everything we do in STEMAZING. It's incredible to see. Thank you. If you want more information about what Everrose and Pointer Group do, then Sue's going to put a link to their web pages in the chat for you. And thank you to Emma, who's doing our signing for us today. So hopefully you can see her on your screen. But if you are having any issues with any of the communication on this webinar, you can click to have the live transcribe so that you can see in written words what we're saying, but also we have Emma there to make this webinar as inclusive as possible. So I just want to, before we get on to our speakers, make a point of saying that although INWED is a fantastic time to be celebrating women in engineering, really it needs to be a call to action. So I'm hoping today that you all take away some top tips for actionable, tangible things you can do to level up how you are being a role model or active ally to inspire inclusion in STEM, both in your workplace, in your community, in schools, and everywhere you go, because it is the responsibility of all of us to make inclusive workplaces. You've probably all seen the stats from Engineering UK that show the number of women in engineering has dropped slightly. It's only a small drop, and you know, statistically, is that significant? I don't know, but it's still a worrying sign. So we all need to do more to level up as role models and active allies. And hopefully today you will get some top tips for exactly how you can do that in real life. All right, so I can't wait to get on to hearing about what all of our speakers have got to say. And the first speaker we have joining us is Nikki Ameka. So Nikki is an incredible woman. She is a very passionate engineer, and she's going to talk to us today about empowering parents in their journey back to work. Over to you, Nikki. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I have to say, I'm really loving this. It's the first webinar I've been on, and we've had someone do sign language. And this is inclusivity in action. So thank you very much for that. So good afternoon, the STEMAZING team, my fellow panelists, and of course, our esteemed listeners on Zoom. I'm honored to be here today, joining you to celebrate International Women in Engineering Day, which is hosted by the amazing STEMAZING crew. So as we focus on this year's INWED theme, which is enhanced by engineering, I would like to share with you today a topic that's dear to me, but I also know that, deeply resonates with majority of listeners today on Zoom. And that's the journey of parents returning to the workforce after a career break. Can I please have the next slide? So why is this topic important? Firstly, I'm a parent myself. And secondly, there's some shocking statistics that I saw when I started to research this topic. And the thing is, contrary to what people believe, statistics show that 98% of moms do want to go back to work. And this is from a survey that was done by an organization called Careers After Babies. And they surveyed, I think, some 828 parents. And so the statistics from that survey is what I've presented here today. But only 13% of those 828 women surveyed said that they felt it was viable to go back to work full-time. 24% said they had tried to go back full-time. And a staggering 79% ended up leaving the workplace because they just couldn't juggle full-time work alongside having a baby. And then when you look at women in senior positions, the problem they have is, a lot of them go back to work within 6 months. And that's because the law in the UK says that if you come back to your work in less than 6 months or within 6 months, by law, your job must be there for you and you can return to your work, to your job. After 6 months, it's not mandatory for your job to be there, but the company should offer you a similar job. So what women in senior position do is they go back to work very quickly so they can have their positions. But 57% of them end up leaving the organization within 2 years. So what's the problem with all these statistics? Why is this an issue? Already in engineering, we have a skills shortage. There aren't enough of us. A lot of the kids don't want to study STEM anymore. We're trying our best to get more people into STEM. So in an industry we're already facing a skills shortage, we're experiencing these issues where those that are experienced that should be role models and should, encourage the next generation are leaving work themselves. And there's another research which was done by, I think, stem.co.uk or something like that. I've put the reference on the screen. What they said was by 2035, we would need to fill 1.9 million STEM jobs. If people are leaving, particularly experienced people, and the younger ones are not coming in, how are we going to be able to fill a lot of these 1.9 roles? And this is just in the UK, by the way, not in other countries. So how are we going to do this? So this is a real problem for us. And parents, I think, are the one group that sometimes we forget to talk about. Maybe because we think it's a given. Yes, we're parents, it's part of life. So carry on with it, get on with it kind of thing. We forget that it's still part of this diversity topic that we're all talking about. So this is the problem, the issue. And the next thing I would like to move on to is, so what is it exactly that is causing this problem? Because we need to understand the root cause to be able to address the issue and help people and help the industry as a whole. So one thing I spoke to a few people living in other countries, did a few research. And I think it's not just about speaking to other people, even for myself, it's what I've noticed as a parent. I think the one thing we have here in the UK that's a problem is we have a childcare policy that's lagging behind. So it's lagging behind progressive European countries like Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Germany. In those countries, if I use Sweden as an example, when parents have kids, they go on maternity, they have a whole year to go away, and by law, their job will remain there for them. They can come back to that same job. And the 1 year given to them, both dad and mom can split the 1 year. And not only that, the first 3 months, they get their 100% pay. And then from month 4 to 12, it becomes 80% pay. And they do encourage dads, by the way, to share that maternity with the moms. But over here in the UK, it seems to be different. You know, you can't come if you can 1 year, you don't necessarily have to go back to your job, but they can give you a similar job. So it's just all the policy, the government policies don't really encourage women to go back. So that needs to change, and the government needs to be on par with what some of these countries, they're doing very well in some of the Scandinavian countries, and I think we can look to them for things. You know, it's so good that if people decide they don't want to go back to work in Sweden, you can then go on to study, and the government will give you free childcare while you are studying or retraining, and they will pay for your retraining as well. Over here, we don't have that kind of support in the UK. If you want to do that. The second problem we have in the UK is the high cost of childcare. My kids are no longer at that age group, they're now teenagers. But some of my friends having kids now, living in London, they're paying like £2,000 or 1,900 a month for a child aged 6 weeks to 2 years old for full-time nursery place. You know, that's ridiculous. When you go to some of the Scandinavian countries like Sweden, as I mentioned, they've capped how much childcare should be. And so it's still based on your salary, like a means tested based on the salary, but it's capped. So you'd never, I doubt they're paying 1,900 or so a month for childcare over there. And, you know, it's easy for them to go back to work. And the childcare facilities, I've been told, are very good. And so parents, you know, can go to work feeling happy that their kids are well looked after. Another problem we have is insufficient childcare places. You know, there are situations where in the very good nurseries in London, for example, you're having to be on waiting lists just to get your kids to go to get into a nursery. If the child doesn't go to nursery, you can go back to work. So sometimes you would have people, even, I remember when I was pregnant, and this was 15 years ago, and somebody said to me, oh, you've got to put your twins on the waiting list. You know, you've got to. So to make sure you have two places in the same nursery, make sure they're on the waiting list. You know, I'm like, I've not even had the kids. I'm wondering what, 5 months pregnant with the twins. Are you asking me to go put their names on the waiting list? I haven't even named them. So that's the problem we have here. Whereas in Sweden, where my cousin lives, she was saying almost every area has a childcare facility. So they don't have that problem where there's no place for a child. As soon as the child is born and you finish your 1 year maternity, you will always find a place for your child in some Scandinavian countries. So again, this is what you know, the government needs to be looking at. They do have a separate system out there, of course, but I believe they've chosen to prioritize family parents. It's all about your priorities as a country, as a society. So the question is, what are we prioritizing here in the UK? So maybe it's time to look inwards and reprioritize and put you know, parents on that agenda. Of course, these are not just all the problems, or there are other secondary problems as well. So now the call to action is, what can parents and what can companies do to help parents back to work? So some companies are very good. So my previous company, PM Group, they have returner programs. They give you a mentor, a buddy. They don't include you in the main uh, recruitment process, because then you're competing with more experienced people. They have a special program where they judge you against other people coming in, and then the interview process is slightly different and the support system is slightly different. Shell too does that, and a few other companies do this special program. So that's one thing more companies can do for parents coming back. Reskilling program as well. So it's very difficult for people to pay for their reskilling, but there are now organizations, I think like X Academy, they try to help people from oil and gas to transition into renewable, and they help retrain them to work in renewable energy companies. But there's so many other reskilling programs going on. We need more of those, and we need the governments and companies to support. Companies can also have supportive systems and all of that. But due to time, I think I have to finish very quickly. So in conclusion, what I would like to say is parents, particularly mothers, stand at the front line of human capital development. They are the first educators of our children. They're shaping future, and parents are shaping future leaders, scientists, innovators, even before the children receive their formal education. So the work that parents do must be valued by society, I think. So companies and governments should strive to create a family-friendly environment, family-friendly work policies that allow parents to nurture and invest in children who are the future of our society. So please, companies, remember, when you offer a parent a job after their career break, you're not just filling a vacant position in your company. You are investing in their children who are a society's most valuable resource and its best hope for the future. And they're going to help us fill our 1.9 million STEM jobs by 2035. So thank you all for listening. Sorry it's rushed, but
No,
it's the time.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I'm going to leave your conclusion slide up on the screen there while we have a quick chat about it, because I think that is a fantastic slide. And I really love the emphasis that you're putting on just prioritizing that this is something to think about in the plethora of diversity characteristics that we consider, that we look to, welcome more women into STEM organizations, welcome more people of global majority or ethnic minority into STEM organizations. I think it's so important that we factor in parents and carers in that. And just like you said, actually some really great top tips on this slide for what people can do. We've had a comment from Lisa in here saying how it's, quite often it's parents who may suffer a crisis of confidence or a life-affirming moment or both when you become a parent. And, you're dealing with all of that whilst trying to get back into your day job. It's a lot, isn't it, Nikki, when you're coming back into work after being a parent, whether that's a mother or a father. And actually, if we had more inclusive cultures that and policies, child-friendly policies, and the whole support around it, the system of support, everyone would be better off.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And like Lisa said, is it a lobbying job that we need to do, thinking about the new government?
I think so, absolutely. It's a lobbying job because if we want something done as a society, we've got to push for it. And I think it's just one of many things we've got to push for. And, we just have to keep trying.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. There's some more questions for you, Nikki, in the chat. So I wonder if you'll be able to get to those. Some people are asking what was the name of the company that helped reskill oil and gas people. Maybe you can put that.
I think it's X Academy. They're on LinkedIn. If you put in X Academy, and they've got a website as well. They
There's
give.
also a fantastic company called STEM Returners that
Yes.
help anybody, not just women, get back into STEM after a career break, which doesn't have to be a parental career break.
Yes, and there's FBM Global. They helped my friend. So they're a tech company and they helped her with reskilling. FDM, Freddy Delta Mother Group.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And they help anybody, not just women.
And then, yeah, Maria's put in there, very good point, Maria. Organizations like Pregnant Then Screwed do a lot of lobbying to government around this. So giving them, what we can do as individuals is show our support to that, sign petitions, get this conversation raised in government so that we are forced to talk about it, because people who are not parents or carers, or who have maybe a bit of an old school dynamic with this, where maybe their other half does all of the childcare and child rearing, it's just not on their radar. It's not something they would consider, which is the whole point of these diversity conversations, is that we all raise our self-awareness.
I was just going
Brilliant.
to say something. You mentioned people may lose their confidence and all of that while they're at work. So one thing I did, which I believe a few other people do it, is that I always got myself involved in one voluntary work or another while I was off looking after my twins. And so, if you're doing that, it's still the same communication skills, teamwork skills, and all of leadership skills that you're using. It doesn't matter that you're not paid for it. And so that keeps up your confidence and your networking, and it just makes you feel like you're doing more than just looking after the kids all the time.
Brilliant. Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Nikki. Fantastic. Loads of fantastic comments from the audience in the chat as well. So have a look through those and reply to any of those that you're able to. Thank you, everybody. Amazing. Right. So from thinking about empowering parents and carers back to work, we have our next speaker that we welcome to our virtual stage, Anna Preston, who is one of our incredible STEMAZING role models, and she is going to give you insights about her personal story, and I'm sure you will learn a lot and take away a lot from Anna. So over to you, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here today. It's a total honour to have been invited to speak and talk about myself, which I never quite get why people are so interested in it, but hopefully I'll be able to tell you something about why I'm so interested in STEM and promoting it today. So I'm not going to spend ages on the first slide. It's just a little bit about me. I'm a chartered civil engineer. I've worked in the construction industry now for over 25 years. I'm a STEM role model, and it always blows me away when I'm able to say that I'm a STEM role model. I'm a STEMAZING Academy graduate, so it's where I met Alex, and I've never looked back since I did the STEMAZING scheme. It's really, really helped me. It's helped me move forward and realise where my passions lie. I got an autism diagnosis 6 years ago, which helped me make sense of myself and also gave me a passion to sort of promote what I've learned and help other people understand a bit more about what it's like for me and what my world is like. Also, finding out that I was autistic also made me feel even more passionate about promoting STEM, especially to SEND pupils or additional support needs as it is in Scotland. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we move on to my next slide, please. So this is the bit where I'm going to talk a bit about me and my sort of story, and it sort of explains a bit about why I'm doing what I'm doing now. So basically, when I was at school, I was given careers advice, what was totally inappropriate. I was encouraged to go down a path of a career that I wasn't actually interested in at all. And with this in mind, I started deliberately not performing properly at school. I just didn't want to do the career, and I was terrified about what my future was going to entail if I was forced in the future to do a career that I wasn't interested in. So I deliberately performed badly at school and started failing everything just to try and get away from being forced into a career that I didn't want to do. I felt like the only thing that I was actually in control of was getting away from the career by failing everything. That was the only thing that I could do, which could, if I'd have carried on down that path, I could have ended up being a dropout or a total failure, not being able to work or anything. But fortunately, at this point, my dad noticed how bad things had got for me, and he stepped in and arranged a careers test for me. If that hadn't happened, I don't know what would have happened to me. But the careers test suggested engineering, and that's where I sort of started getting my interest in engineering, and it increased my confidence at school and made me want to perform because I've now got a goal that I wanted to work towards. And everything sort of revolved around that. So with that in mind, that's why it's so important for me to raise awareness. If I'd been fortunate enough to encounter a role model, neurodivergent or otherwise, just a STEM role model, I might have found it much more easier at that time because I'd been able to find out what I was passionate and interested in. So it seems very sad that I put on the statistics for how many autistic adults are actually in any kind of paid employment, and it's only 22%. And that also drives me forward to promote this, not just to school pupils, to everybody that I can, about STEM careers. I mean, if I can just find one person that was like me, that was struggling to find a goal or something to focus on, I think that's a massive win for me and for the person as well that finds out about what they want to do. It's also like as well a problem in the workplace that 84% of employers still admit to having little or no understanding of neurodiversity. I think that's important that we make that clear as well. We need to help people in the workplace too, not just at schools. So if I can move on to my next slide, please. I'm aware that I don't want to go over on the talking because I'd like to leave some time for questions as well today. I don't want it just to be all about me. But this is a big mantra what Alex has. you can't be what you can't see. But it's just so true that we need more visible role models for children so they can consider what career options there are out there. And if they can't see role models, they can end up being like me when I was at school, struggling and not knowing what to do with themselves. So that's why I feel like that's so important, that we've become more visible and more relatable role models for the next generation. So how do we do this? Well, we need to raise awareness. We need to promote inclusion. For us to promote, we need to promote inclusion, then we can see effective changes taking place. Because the way things are at the moment, we could be missing out on huge pools of talent that are just being disregarded because we're just ignoring pupils that don't know what they want to do, or may not stand out, or maybe like me, just going down the wrong path because they haven't got an interest or a goal to work towards. So that's why I'm championing that now. And I also say, dare to be yourself. When I first got my autism diagnosis, I didn't want anybody to know about it. I tried to hide it. And I sort of felt like, I don't want anyone to know, because it does seem to have still like quite a lot of stigma around it. But I think people need to start stepping forward. Since I've come out and told everybody about being autistic and stepped up as a STEM role model, I've had such a positive reception and acceptance, and I think that means that I'm sort of living proof that this does actually work. So I'm encouraging anyone out there who can to step up and be a relatable role model for STEM in whatever form they can. And that's about all I'd like to say today, and I'm open to questions if anyone would like to ask anything.
Wow, thank you, Anna. It always blows me away to hear your story because it's so powerful. And I think the fact that you still don't even recognize how powerful it is just shows how humble you are, how maybe you don't fully recognize your power as a role model yet, but it absolutely will get there, because I think what you're doing already is incredible and so courageous. I mean, you literally live the values of STEMAZING with our 3 C's: curious, creative, and courageous. And when I see you doing STEM outreach and getting involved in initiatives like our Spark initiative in STEMAZING, which is all about getting relatable, neurodiverse and with disability role models out there in front of young people who also have the same in some capacity, to really show them that they can make it in STEM. It just blows me away, the power of that. And you, like you said, if you reach one person, whether that's a young person or an adult, to help show them the opportunities available to them, then that in itself makes a ripple effect, because that one person will go on to engage and make a difference to more people. And you've been the core of that ripple effect. So incredible. Yeah. Does anyone, so we've got a question here from Lisa, who said, what a great thing that your dad noticed this. What was the test that you did? Do you remember that?
I do remember it. At the time I was terrified. It wasn't like a test like an exam where you had the right or wrong, but it was just like a list of questions about what I was actually interested in, and you had to give them a score from 1 to 5. I remember doing it. I was about 15, 16 at the time, and it just like, are you interested in this or not? And I gave them scores, and it came back with 5 or 6 different types of engineering as being the most suitable career for me. And up until that point, nobody had ever suggested engineering, and I didn't even know it was a career option. So it was like, oh, and being like I am, I have to know everything about everything. So then I had to go to the library, because there wasn't any internet in those days, and I had to just sit reading about all the different types of engineering. Spent hours looking at it, and I picked civil engineering because I wanted to work outside, because I don't like being around lots of people all the time. And I was just so excited to have found something that I thought, I can do that, and that's something I want to do. So I was so glad that my dad noticed that there was a problem with the careers that were being suggested for me, mainly banking and secretarial jobs, which would not have been appropriate in any way for me.
Wow. Yeah. No, that is absolutely shocking, isn't it? That's incredible. Yeah. Kudos to your dad. Absolutely. Amazing. And then we've got another question here saying, so Maria has put, as a mum to neurodivergent children how important it is to have role models. I completely agree about that, and really, really appreciate people who are stepping out and being the role models that those young people can connect with. Absolutely. And Miriam said, thank you, Anna. What made you seek a diagnosis, and did it make you recognize the issues that you had at school?
So what made me seek a diagnosis? Well, I was sort of going through a very bad point in my life. I was under too much pressure in my personal life, and at work, I was being put under pressure to go on courses that were overnight. And I got to the point where I just couldn't cope anymore. I was at the point where I was actually wanting to break my leg or something, so I didn't have to do courses at work. And I thought, what's wrong with me? So I went for counselling, and the counsellor noticed, I think she sort of just instantly noticed more or less that I might be autistic, so she suggested it to me. And at first I sort of dismissed it and thought, no, that's like rubbish. It's not, can't possibly be true. So I went away and had a look at what it meant. And then for a bit I started thinking, yes, that is me. I think it would really help me to find out. I need to know whether that is me. So then I sort of went down the route of getting a formal diagnosis. It did take quite a while. It was definitely worthwhile doing. And as I say, it's helped me make sense of myself and my life. It helped me realise that why I didn't fit in sometimes at school, why I had difficulty with social activities, and why I have difficulties with changes to my routine. And sometimes why, when in the past I thought I'm not clever enough or not good enough, it just explained to me why it takes me a bit longer sometimes to learn things. Got different or sort of processing system. So yeah, it helped me make sense a lot of everything around me.
Brilliant, brilliant. And Anne has asked, what are the main challenges you face in the workplace, and what are some key actions that colleagues or employers can take?
I think I'll answer the second sort of part of the question first. The employers just need to listen to what I've got to say, I think, and take it seriously. I'm not asking, when I'm asking for things specific to me, I'm not asking for them as a sort of benefit or an advantage. They're just things that I actually need. So the problems that I have in the workplace mainly, I'm sat in the middle of an office that's very, very noisy. When I'm in a noisy place, I just hear snippets of conversations, can hear a little bit of everybody's conversation, so I can't get any work done. I also don't like having bright lights above me. I sort of feel like strip lights, they sort of flicker, and it gives me a headache and makes me feel unwell. And I also can't sit near the air conditioning, so this is going to sound really odd, but I can't stand any drafts on my ears. That's a sensory thing. It's mainly sensory problems, I think, at work, but there's also other things that need to be taken into account, such as when they have overnight courses. I don't like being away from my own house. I really, really struggle being around people for long periods of times. And I've found in the past when I have tried to go to the away days and overnight things, it's too much people, too much for me. I can't cope, and it can take several days then for me to recover from that. So they're the real problems that I have at work. And sometimes I think it does affect my career prospects. If I can't join in with everything, I think it sometimes means that I get left behind, and I quite often feel very sad that I can't join in with the things that are happening that all my colleagues go to. So yeah, that's a summary of work.
Thank you so much for being so honest and open, and sharing that vulnerable side of you as well, Anna, because I have no doubt that that will help a lot of people, whether they can relate to that directly or maybe someone that they care about or work with. So lots and lots of incredible takeaways from that. Thank you. And the key thing for me really is to try and find out about what people need as individuals, get to know people as individuals, and build that relationship and safe space of trust that they feel they can actually ask for what they need, or maybe they don't even know what they need, but can help work out what they need to be comfortable at work and be able to bring all their talents. Like Anna, you're clearly such an incredible engineer. You've got so much to give, so much passion. And there's things that can be done in your environment and with your employer and, you know, people around you that can help bring out that in a way that works for everyone. So why not find the things that work? So yeah, it's so valuable to hear your personal story. Thank you so much, Anna. There's lots of love for what you've said in the chat, so maybe you can go and have a look there and reply to some of the messages. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. All right. So from Anna's personal story, we have next up on our virtual stage, Paul Barker, founder of Inter Engineering. And Paul, very seamlessly, obviously, we plan this perfectly, is going to talk about what we can do to open the eyes of young people into like careers in STEM and particularly engineering, and how we do that, why it's so important, and what we can all do to help. So thank you, Paul. Over to you.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, so this kind of quite nicely follows on really from what Anna was kind of talking about in the earlier talk. But I mean, just kind of introduction. So I'm an engineer myself. So I did an apprenticeship from school when I was actually 15 because I was one of the youngest in the school. And my journey into engineering there was loads of things that happened to me that enabled me and helped me to become an engineer, to get that job from school. And that doesn't happen to most people, sadly. So people that are in education, getting a job is very, very tough. So I worked as an engineer, and then I became a design engineer. Then I went into education. So I worked in colleges as a lecturer and then as head of sales and recruitment for apprenticeships. So I can talk about that, the apprenticeship bit in a minute. But now I've started my own company where I am, it's a recruitment company. And the world of recruitment is a very unforgiving and brutal place. And this is why young people have to be ready to navigate that. So yeah, next slide, please. And again, thank you. So one integral part of getting young people ready for work is about being able to support education. So people who are on this call that might be thinking, I'd like to kind of support young people in some way, but maybe I don't know how. The good news is with education is there are no rules. There's no one way to do this. What you will find is education establishments will be very, very receptive to you coming in and just helping them in literally any way that you can. All that needs is for you to kind of, make that step, contact your local college or school. And if you think that you can offer something based on what you hear today, and if something resonates with you, you think, you know what, I'd love to talk about this or help people with this, then just do it. So that's my overriding advice. Just do it. Don't overthink it, just do it. So if we look at kind of how we can support and why we would support education. So number one, inspire and educate. So there's lots of people that you can help to inspire and educate. Teachers, career leads, students, and parents. So make no presumptions that people within education understand what STEM really is when it comes to careers, because a lot of them don't. Sometimes you've got from teachers, especially within secondary education, they might never have actually been in industry, and they have gone through education themselves. They've got the teaching qualification, then gone back into education, and they can't really always articulate or describe what it is to work and to really inspire these students. And this is where kind of your involvement can really help with that. Careers leads, again, careers leads have got one of the most difficult jobs in the world. They've got to help individuals, they've got, usually it's one person that's a career lead within a school. Sometimes they don't even work full time. I know there's a lot of kind of generic careers activity that goes on to try and plant a seed, but it's about being able to really help them create, join the dots and understand what's going on in industry so that they can really pass on that advice. The students themselves. So it's so important that students aren't just aware of what these careers are, but they understand what they need to do to get a job. So when I was talking about when I was working as head of sales and recruitment, what I found overwhelmingly was that we used to have young people would come to my college that I was working at and be interviewed by my team because they want an apprenticeship. So they would come and sit in front of the team, and the first question would be, okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself. They couldn't answer that question. They couldn't do it. No one had really asked them that before. and they weren't prepared for it. So then you'd say, right, okay, well, you've applied for an apprenticeship in engineering. Just tell me a little bit about engineering, what it is that interests you and excites you. They couldn't answer that question either, because nobody had spent any time with them, kind of getting them aware that this is the process, this is what's going to happen. So any way that you can pass on your knowledge in terms of what it's like, how you need to get a job, you know, the kind of questions you're going to get asked at that interview, that's going to really help them. But as well with parents, so the support of parents is absolute, and guardians is absolutely essential for any young person to be able to kind of navigate that world of finding a job. A lot of parents are unaware of what careers within STEM are, either because they've never worked in it themselves, they don't have anyone within the family that's done that. They want to advise their young person as best as they can, but they're not always armed with the kind of the information to do that. So if you're on this call and you feel that you can help in any way, again, speak to your local college or school about how you could get involved. So what kind of things could you do? So from a knowledge perspective, well, what is engineering? Most people think that, well, everyone knows what engineering is, and it's just not true. A lot of people really don't know what engineering is. And sometimes you've got to get over those, what you might think of as kind of basic questions and basic kind of knowledge to enable them to think, actually, that is interesting. And why choose engineering? Again, you know, if you are, I was creative at school. I nearly went to sixth form to do art because that's what I wanted to do. I love art and fashion and skateboarding. That's what I loved. I didn't know that engineering is creative. I was a design engineer, and that was really super creative. But I had no idea about that as a kind of 15-year-old. Technologies, you know, what technologies have been used within engineering? Again, people sometimes see engineering as a kind of dirty, hands-on, you know, white man on a shop floor with his hard hat on and things like that. And that's just not the case. It's an innovative sector where it's, you know, a diverse population of people that are using up-to-date technologies, talk about them, inspire and educate. And then as well, the different sectors of engineering. So people might not be aware, you know, there's multiple sectors and subsectors of engineering that people can work in. Pass on your knowledge about what that is. So skills, really important. Soft skills, communication, understanding a little bit about yourself, understanding what they need to do to get a job. That is critical, and it's something that's maybe not looked at. I see a lot of work and talk about CV building. It's like, no, please, no more CV building. They need to be able to communicate and get a job and go through that process. And if you think about somebody who might be neurodiverse, unfortunately, they've got to go through that process as well. So people like that need to work harder to be able to overcome the recruitment processes, unfortunately, you know, because this is a reality that are in place and they do need to get through. Hard skills, anything where you can go in and you can talk to them about developing some kind of portfolio or project, and that might be where you can help. You might give a little task that the group can do, and they could do that as a student-led project. They could do that as an enrichment activity that you could support the school with. They come out with it with something that they've done themselves, that they're aware of, that they can use, that they can, if they go to any interview, they can talk about it. It will give them confidence to be able to get through that process and maybe get a job. So yeah, from a kind of behaviours perspective as well, what is so important is to be able to stand out from the crowd when it comes to finding a job. So many young people think that you just put a CV together and you apply for a job. That does not work. What they really need to do is look at strategies to how can they contact a hiring manager? How could they provoke a conversation? How could they facilitate to go into an employer and have a tour or a chat? These things that make someone think, this young person's keen, you know, they're actually going above and beyond. And that's where, you know, you could help to get them to think about this slightly differently. And then kind of finding a job, especially apprenticeships. So difficult to do this. There's no one central database to find an apprenticeship. Quite often, apprenticeships won't be listed. The apprenticeship might be sat in someone's head. They're thinking, you know, we could do an apprentice this year, but they've done nothing about it. If someone could contact them in a proactive way, you can actually create your own apprenticeship opportunities. But again, it's been able to speak to young people about this. And then acting like an engineer. So super, super important. engineers need to be able to communicate. Engineers need to be able to turn up on time and presentable, and they need to be able to talk about engineering. Now, they don't need to be the experts, but if they can talk about a few things and which they've researched and they're able to do that, that's going to really set them apart from others. And be resilient, because as we know, they're going to get knockbacks. Left, right and centre, they really are. You know, they might have to apply for 20, 30, 40 jobs. They might have to ring 30 employers before someone will speak to them. So it's about being able to let them know that and understand what the next steps are. So specific support is kind of careers days, presentations, masterclasses, university feedback about, you know, what course you went on and what that was like and what you developed. But it's just about being there, being a role model and supporting. Okay, next slide, please. So how this benefits you. This is a two-way thing. It will develop you as an individual. So by being involved in with a school or a college, you can develop your own communication skills. Becoming a positive role model is so important, so fulfilling as well. And you will get a lot from that, especially when you can see that you are making a difference. It's something to shout about on your own LinkedIn profile, because this is about your career development as well. Have these things to talk about and share them with your network. It will enable you to become part of a network of not just educators, but also employers as well, and really kind of get your name out there. You could then find out that, you know, in a few years, you're talking on a presentation like this also. It could also open up opportunities for further STEM work, but as well, who knows where it could lead. You know, I was an engineer. I'm now not. Now I've got my own business, and that was through working in education. So by being involved in something like this, you understand what the education landscape is, what the skills landscape is, and how that might be able to change your career going forward.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Paul. And what I absolutely love from hearing more about your work, I highly recommend everybody on the call follows what Paul is doing and get in touch with him and see what more you can learn from him, because the work he's doing to engage, you know, at sort of college level and opening eyes and giving them, these young people, the skills they need to be able to even get a foot in the door and open their own doors into the world of engineering, particularly when we talk about diversity characteristics and social mobility. If you think about it, how much better prepared is an individual to go to an interview who has got working parents, maybe degree educated parents, who can help them prepare for that interview, even to things like, this is what you should wear, make sure you turn up a bit early, you know, prepare questions that they might want to ask. If you have got parents or carers or guardians at home who are out of work, who maybe themselves are, you know, struggling with the workplace, how on earth is that young person meant to get that guidance? So it's critical that we as role models who have these skills and experience share them with young people to help them with that transition. So I don't know if you've got a final word to say on that, Paul, about sort of the importance of this work in terms of social mobility.
I mean, absolutely. You presume that young people know what to do. So you presume that they understand that they turn up to an interview in smart clothing. You know, I've had young people go for apprenticeships when I was at college, and they turn up with a football shirt on because they didn't know. And what happens is that experience for them is so negative and so shocking and off-putting that actually don't apply for another apprenticeship. And it's not their fault. That's the key thing here. This isn't their fault. They're just not aware. And without that support, it makes it so difficult.
Yeah, you're completely right. You're completely right. And as an interviewer, we can maybe be a bit more open-minded and aware of that as well. So if somebody turns up to an interview not wearing what we would expect or not having a list of questions to ask, like instead of thinking, oh, well, this person is lazy or unprepared or can't be bothered or doesn't want this job, try and find the strengths in them, try and help them bring out their strengths in that interview and give them a chance to shine, even if it ends up the interview opportunity for you ends up more like a coaching opportunity for that young person to help them in their next interview. Don't just think they're wasting your time and rush them out the door. So I think it's like having compassion and kindness, isn't it? And an open mind.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to ask them questions. If you think they're struggling, help them out, ask them, you know, suggest what they could talk about, because what you will find is actually deep inside them, they do have something. They just need support to get it out.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Paul. That was brilliant. Loads of top tips and takeaways from that. Thank you. All right. Next up in our lineup, we are welcoming Maria to our virtual stage. Maria Rossini, who is the Head of Education at the British Science Association. And I'm so excited to hear what Maria has got to say about how to make STEM genuinely more inclusive. Thank you, Maria. Over to you.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt. I'm just going to take a quick break.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you, Emma.
Do you want me to carry on, or should I wait for Emma to get back?
Do you want to do your introduction to yourself, Maria, while we're waiting for Emma to get back, and then she can join us again? Thank you.
Great, cheers. So do you want to skip to the next slide? So my name is Maria. Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be on this call today. So a little bit about me. So I've been working in STEM education for almost 20 years. I'm just writing these slides. How has it been that long? I've worked in schools, in museums, universities, and a little bit in broadcasting. But I'm now the Head of Education at the British Science Association. And I think it's worth saying from the outset, so one of the reasons that I care so deeply is because of my own lived experiences. So I was a free school meal kid, navigating disability, both having a disabled parent and then developing a disability while I was at university. And alongside my professional career, I'm also a mum and carer to 2 neurodivergent children. So I've kind of got it from lots of different angles. So it's such a pleasure to be on this call and see people speaking to so many of these things that I also have lived through. So that's just a little bit about me and about why I care about this work. Move to the next slide. Shall I wait for Emma to pop back on?
I think if you don't mind carrying on, because we send out the slides to everyone afterwards, so they've got all this information. Yeah, thank you.
So as Alex said, I work for the British Science Association, and I think over the years, I've been at the BSA in my role as Head of Education for about 7 years, but been at the BSA since 2012. And in that time, we haven't really seen the dial shift very much. In fact, in the last 30 years, we've not really seen the dial shift much. And as you mentioned earlier, the number of women in engineering has actually just dipped slightly. So the big picture is that only 27% of the STEM workforce is female. That's compared to 52% of the wider workforce. STEM workers are less likely to be aged 50 or older. And there's also a bit of a disparity in terms of STEM workers having disability as well. And although 12% of the STEM workforce are from ethnic minorities, which is similar to the proportion of the rest of the workforce, there's a lot of nuance within that. And so a lot of interconnectedness, especially in terms of women and women from different backgrounds. So that's the big picture, and that's one of the big drivers. And if we go to the next slide. But so one of the things that has really, really influenced my role, so as Head of Education at the British Science Association, look after all of our education work. That includes the Crest Award scheme, which I'll mention briefly in a bit, British Science Week, which many of you may have come across. And a massive influence in everything I've done over the last 6 or 7 years has been the Aspires research, which came out from UCL, and also KCL has been involved. And that's where Professor Louise Archer and her team kind of done a very, very longitudinal study of young people and their career aspirations in relation to science. And this slide, I think, really gets to the nugget of it, which shows you that whether you're 10 or whether you're 17 or 18, actually loads of young people think they learn interesting things in science. Their parents think it's important and valuable, and they think that scientists do valuable work. But do they aspire to be a scientist or an engineer? The slide is very similar for engineering as well as across all of STEM. No, and that doesn't really change massively whether you're 10 or whether you're 13 or whether you're 17. And actually, it shows that young people are kind of discounting STEM as a career quite early on in their life, and that's before the age of 10. And there's other research, which I haven't listed here, that WISE published recently, which is around girls dipping off in their confidence around the age of 5 or 6. So if you ask a young girl, do they want to play a super smart game, and a young boy, do you want to play a super smart game? At age 5, girls and boys all want to play the super smart game. At age 6, more boys will play the super smart game than the girls. There's something happening. My daughter turned 6, and I was like, whoa, what just happened to your confidence? There is something like across the board, and it's cultural, and it's deeper than maybe we completely understand. So we should be working with younger children. A lot of the outreach out there has been traditionally aimed at secondary, often kind of like choosing your GCSEs or your A levels. But the reality is you've made decisions way before that point. And so I would just encourage people not to be scared or cautious about working with younger age groups, because that's where it's going to have the most impact. Next slide. So science, tech, and engineering need to be relatable. I love that there's been a lot of talk about inspiration, and I know STEMAZING talk about inspiring. But if most young people discount STEM before age 10, we need to focus our inclusion efforts at primary aged young people. And we need to focus on connection and relatability rather than just being inspirational and fun, because they already think that science is fun. They already think it's interesting. They just don't think it's for people like them. So how can we change that? And part of it is to actively challenge some stereotypes, and that includes the smart, geeky, elite narratives that we see often around physics, but not just about physics. You know, the Sun will call like science researchers boffins. You know, that's the kind of cultural messaging that is out there. And often we have been in the sector reinforcing those. We run competitions. There's a lot of STEM competitions out there. Now, that was great if you win that competition. But I'm going to be honest, if there's a running competition, I'm not going to be entering any running competition because I am a rubbish runner and I don't want to look stupid. But why do we think that running a competition would help a young person who's not confident in STEM get into STEM? The reality is they're going to be like, just like me with running, they're going to be like, I don't want to do that. Like what I need for running is something like park run, something that's inclusive, something that says, hey, everybody, let's do this together. And it doesn't really matter. And you can measure yourself against your last personal best, measure yourself against you, not against other people. And so what we need for STEM is the equivalent. We need to have a park run mentality when we're thinking about inclusion in STEM. Next slide. And so I'd really encourage you to connect using attributes. For those of you, so if you're inspired by the talk already about role models, like the best thing you can do is connect with somebody's internal attribute. So the team at Northumbria University a few years ago did some work and they identified these 15, 16 kind of attributes of people who work in STEM. And they have developed all kinds of materials around that. There's something called STEM Person of the Week. But essentially, they're things that young people from any background can identify with. So if I introduce myself as, hi, I'm Maria, I'm a scientist, that could be a little bit like, scientist. Hi, I'm Maria, and do you know what? I'm such a curious person. I love working with other people in a collaborative way, and I am really creative, and I love being creative in my job. And, you know, kid on the other side be like, oh, I'm curious, I'm creative. I'm not saying you use all of these and to, you know, pick the ones that are about you and genuine to you in your job. But it really, really helps. And it's actually, we've started to incorporate that into all of our educational activities at the British Science Association. So if you look in our British Science Week activity packs or our newer Crest resources, we try and use these words when we talk about scientists and engineers. So if you are going out and being an ambassador to young people, use these words about yourself because they will be able to relate to you better through connecting through attributes. Next slide. And finally, let children be the scientist or the engineer. So I was really interested in what Paul was talking about in those steps that are needed to build the skills. And it's just so important. There's nothing like doing a project for yourself. That's why we run the Crest Awards program, which it facilitates project learning from age 3 all the way through 19, and lets young people have power, choice and agency over the projects that they're doing something that's relevant and matters to their lives. Foster curiosity, be curious yourself, and reward and recognise them in a non-competitive way. So that's what's really key about the scheme that we run. It's just, you know, you meet the standard, you get the award, you're not competing against anyone else. But yeah, and linking to other people who are doing those same things. There are loads and loads of fabulous kind of project initiatives around in the STEM space, but you can't underestimate the power of a young person doing a project and being the scientist or the engineer and having that certificate in their hand. It's a bit like with swimming, you know, you go to the lessons, but then at the end of that process, you get your swim certificate. And when my daughter was cautious about moving to stage 3, I was like, but you've got your stage, look, your teacher's giving you the certificate. You're a swimmer, you can go to stage 3. And I think...
Sorry, Maria, can you just slow down slightly?
Oh, sorry, Emma. Yeah, I think that it makes a difference to recognise and reward a young person with a certificate. It shows them that they are the scientist or the engineer, just like with a swimming certificate. Yeah. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Maria. Oh my goodness, so many amazing top tips in there. Anne's put in the chat, love the idea of needing STEM park runs. And I absolutely, that really stood out to me as well. I thought, oh yes, I love that analogy of making a park run like thing for STEM, where it's not this elitist competition. It's about the individuals, but coming together collectively, but it's about making it accessible to all. That is the point of it, isn't it? So much amazing stuff in there. And the point about relatability with those characteristics rather than very stereotypical terms we might use that immediately switch off half the audience. I absolutely love that. Brilliant. Have you got experience yourself of using those STEM characteristics with a whole range of ages, or is that focused on young children?
So those characteristics were developed for use with primary schools, but we have used them in all our education resources. I think they translate across all the age ranges, because, and actually some of the words are slightly tweaked for use with very young children, because they might, you know, you need to understand the vocab. And in terms of, I know a few people have talked about in the chat about working with primary school students, there are some really great resources. So we do have, we have a resource library. Everything is free to download on the Crest resource library. All the primary resources are designed for non-science specialists, but also not necessarily education specialists to be able to deliver. So if you are working with a primary school, they're free to deliver. You can just download them, and there's an organizer's card and then a kind of a children's card as well. So yeah, you can just go for it.
Amazing. And we've got Jess in the chat saying, I'm doing a STEM club with reception and year 1 at the moment. They are so engaged and enthusiastic. I really recommend working with that age group. And Lisa said, totally agree with targeting primary school children. Inclusive STEM work is always good in my experience. Yeah, so a lot of love for doing it for doing STEM outreach with young children as well. And as you know, in STEMAZING, we really champion that, certainly around all the research that says we have to challenge gender stereotypes and stereotypes around who can or should do STEM as young as possible. And you quite rightly said, children are making sort of career limiting choices, maybe even unconsciously by the age of 10. And this confidence thing in girls at the age of 5, 6, I mean, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? What are we doing to our young girls in society? Is we absolutely need to be more aware of that and help give them the confidence they need to go forward. Thank you so much, Maria. So much incredible work in there. And Maria's got her contact details up on the slide. Feel free to link in with her and definitely make the most of all of those incredible resources at the British Science Association. Thank you, Maria. Right. Okay. So amazing, amazing. We are moving on to our next incredible speaker, who is Kaylee, another one of our STEMAZING role models. And Kaylee doesn't have slides, so I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so we can see Kaylee on the big screen. And Kaylee is going to give us her personal story and some insights around being inclusive with STEM as well. Over to you, Kaylee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me. First of all, I need to make an apology because I do have a new hearing dog that's a little bit naughty. So if you hear any barking in the background, please let me know and I'll try and quiet him down. Sorry. So I'm Kaylee. I am currently a lecturer at college, teaching engineering. Previously, I worked in wastewater treatment works as an operational technology trainee engineer. I'm just about to finish my degree finally. So end of July, it's finally coming up now. So I wanted to share with you kind of my journey as a mature female going into education in 2019. I went through school very much believing that I was stupid and that it just wasn't for me. I remember one experience at GCSE English when myself and a few others were stood up and announced to the class that these are the people that weren't going to pass their GCSEs because of laziness. And I understand that the teachers' hope was to motivate us, and maybe that did work for some of them. However, for me personally, that was like well, I'm giving this my all and I'm still failing miserably, so what's the point? So I kind of gave up at that point. I thought, well, school's not for me. I've already been told I'm going to fail. What's the point? I might as well not bother to put in any effort. So that's basically how I ended school. I didn't pass my English GCSE, funnily enough, but I did pass 5 other GCSEs that got me into college. But at that point, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And the careers advisor very kindly said, just pick whatever you want. It's great. You don't need to be focused. You're young. Go for it. So I picked such an eclectic group of subjects that the next careers advisor that I met, unfortunately, was desperately trying to figure out what career I could possibly do with what subjects I'd picked. And we came to the conclusion that I couldn't really do anything with this selection. And so I kind of just fizzled out of college, and that was the end of that. I got on with my life. I had my family, raised them. And by the time I was in mid-20s, I was very much like, I am bored. I need something to challenge me. And my husband at the time was saying, engineering, do engineering. Like, no, that's your thing. That's not my thing. I can't do that. That's not for me. It sounds very much academic, and I'm not academic. And it took him until 2019 to convince me to go and have a go. So I did an online course, which I fell in love with. So I did my level 3, and then I went off to university. And that experience was eye-opening. I had contacted the university prior to going to explain that I was deaf and that I needed accessibility, and there was going to be some things that needed to be put in place. When I arrived on my first day, they went, who are you? We've never heard of you before. We didn't know that you were coming. And so blind panic. And I spent the first 2 months struggling and was at the bottom of every single class and just wasn't getting it, going home crying every evening, spending every night reading through any notes that I had in the hope that something would make sense. And then it wasn't until I kind of had a breakdown and went to the accessibility department saying, look, I can't do this. I'm not going to make it through if this is all you can give me, which is nothing. So they did an emergency assessment to which they identified that, oh, yeah, it's actually an interpreter and some microphones that connect directly to my hearing aids would actually benefit me. So it wasn't until February that I got accessibility. And it changed everything for me. It went from, being bottom of the class, I went straight to the top simply because I had everything provided to me in a language that made sense to me. And it was suddenly dawned on me that, well, hang on a minute, if me at the ripe old age of 30 is sat here finding that everything has changed simply because somebody's allowed me to have accessibility and equality in my education, and I know that this is a problem, that I know this is a problem for children because the language simply isn't there in the STEM subjects to be able to teach them. It wasn't that long ago that deaf children were taught very little in way of academic subjects because they were believed that they weren't intelligent enough to be able to comprehend it. So why do you need a language for something you're not teaching? So there's been lots of projects recently to try and change this fact, and my passion is to make sure that no child or no other human is made to feel that they are not worthy simply because people are not willing to just make a small change and open their world up and see what's there. And I tell this story wherever I go with the STEMAZING group about when I went down to a deaf school down south, and there was a young girl who came up to me and she said, "Oh, you're deaf?" I said, yeah, I'm deaf. And she said, "Like me?" "Yeah." "And you're an engineer?" "Yeah." "So I could be an engineer?" "Yeah." And it was like that moment she suddenly realized that, that was the moment that Alex talks so passionately about being that change you want to see, being that role model. Just by being seen makes a difference to children in a way that you simply don't know. And my personal experience was what triggered me into starting to explore how I could get involved, being a STEM ambassador. And then when the opportunity popped up to join the STEMAZING Academy, I thought, I'll give it a go. And I wrote in my application that I specifically was after doing deaf schools, and that was my aim. And I, much to my surprise, got a message back from Alex and the team saying, "Yep, 100%, we're behind you. Let's do it. Let's make it happen." And haven't looked back. It's been great, and regularly contacted by schools to go in and get involved. And earlier this year, I went along, I think it was in Science Week, to a Liverpool school, which I thought I was going to do one session for a specific group, ended up going through the whole school. So I went from year group to year group, and but they started me off gently with the calm children, and it gradually got more chaotic. By the time we got to reception, there was no crowd control. It was absolute chaos, but they were having a wonderful time doing it. So I mean, it was just fun, and it was great to see the kids smiling and getting involved, and knowing that even if they don't go into STEM, they'll remember that time as a fun thing that happened in school that was different from the normal day to day. And maybe they'll say to their children, "Oh, well, I remember years ago that this person came in and talked to us about STEM. Maybe that was something you want to do." And it's, sharing that knowledge and that passion that I think is what needs to happen, and more people need to get involved. So yeah, that's all I've got to say about my stuff. So I apologise for rambling.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. Oh my goodness, you are an absolute inspiration, and I thank my lucky stars that you applied to be part of STEMAZING all those years ago. And one thing that stands out to me that, for my own personal learning of working with people who have different accessibility needs, is that I specifically asked the question, "What do you need?" Luckily, you already knew because of your experience of being at university. And we got Emma involved doing interpreting as for our live webinars. But if people are asked that question of what do you need to help make this more accessible to you, and if you're in that position, maybe you don't really know what you need, have you got any advice to people for getting started with that? How do you even work out what you need to make life work better for you if you haven't been told or given the tools yet?
Yeah, it's a real challenge. I mean, I'm lucky because I have connections with people that are deaf or class themselves as hard of hearing, so they have technology, and you know, I can say, oh, I don't suppose I could have a go, try your bit of kit. Oh, that doesn't work, that's not great for me, that's not work. And I've had the ability to explore that, you know. But one thing there is, the National Deaf Children's Association has or did have, I need to double check that they still have the scheme, sorry, where you can loan equipment as a trial, and they'll send you, it's for children up to the age of 18 or 21, I think, and they send out equipment like that you can trial and see if it works for you. And they've got a whole range of things, which is excellent. I mean, my biggest challenge that I've come across has been people very kindly asking what I need and then going, we're not doing any of that. And that's been, I still haven't managed to figure out how to navigate that, because it's really disheartening. You know, in my previous job, I had large meetings, and I said, you know, I'm really struggling when you've got a group of people when we're coming in to do team building exercises and we're sat in awkward positions and I'm not able to access the information. If we could be in a horseshoe shape instead of in little tables, that would really benefit me, because although I have some technology, I can only go with one person and listen to them, which doesn't allow for that relaxed, let's have a conversation attitude that workplaces are trying to encourage. And getting hold of interpreters has been somewhat tricky, so I'm very, very grateful that Emma is able to take the time to join us.
Absolutely. And we've got Emma Henderson in the chat has said, Kaylee, one deaf woman engineer to another, well done. The challenges never go away, but it's fabulous you are out showcasing your success. That's amazing. And I think, you know, you and I and Anna as well, we've talked about this before, the importance of feeling confident in yourself and having confidence to stand up, be visible, and ask for what you need. And that takes practice as well, doesn't it? You know, growing your empowerment and your confidence to even recognize and then ask for what you need. Have you got anything to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, that I personally think is something that's come with age. So it's, I think, as role models and, you know, authority figures in children's eyes, we need to be encouraging children to explore their needs and be able to say, actually, no, this is something that I need. And we as adults need to be receptive of that and say, okay, let's make that happen. How can we meet in the middle? What's unreasonable? What's reasonable? You know, and I think that that's going to be almost a society shift that we need to encourage.
Yeah. And I do think it's so much of this is raising awareness in society and all of us working to educate ourselves to help others, work better with others. And ultimately that helps us all. And it's things like, you know, I remember my kids absolutely desperate to start learning British Sign Language after they saw Strictly Come Dancing with that woman, the actress. So I don't know who she is, but she was deaf. Yeah, Rose. Yeah. And the kids loved it, and they got obsessed with trying to learn British Sign Language. And all of a sudden I asked you if you could do a little video for the Cub Scouts that we were working with, because they wanted to learn some. And that's incredible, isn't it? When we as a society raise our awareness and interest in something, what kind of ripple effect that can have. We just need that for all of us with all of our different diversity characteristics. Thank you so much, Kaylee. Really appreciate you sharing your personal story. There's again loads of comments in the chat that if you have a chance to respond to, that would be lovely. Thank you so much. All right. Wow. Gosh, we are doing well, group here. Lovely audience that we've got here in this webinar, because we are powering on through. We have had so much insight and inspiration already, and we are going to move on to our next speaker now, who is Sabrina. So let me share my screen again for Sabrina to join us. So Sabrina, if you are, we welcome you to our virtual stage.
Hi everyone, sorry.
Hi, Sabrina.
Can you see me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. So again, Sabrina is going to share her personal story and the work that she is doing in her company, Singularity, to make workplaces more inclusive for neurodivergent people. Over to you, Sabrina. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, and thanks for all the team for organizing such a great event. I have to say that it's very rewarding to attend to a session where we have all this level of energy, and I read the messages in the chat, and it's whoo. This is very intense, and we'll talk about intensity a bit later. So who I am, I'm Sabrina, I'm 43, I'm neurodivergent. And 17 years ago, I discovered, as 25 years ago, in fact, I discovered that I did my first burnout, sorry, and 17 years ago, sorry, I will do it again. I worked 17 years, sorry, in the cosmetic industry, and I used to work in the STEAM industry. I was heading the data strategy for Chanel, and what struck me during this time is at the age of 26, I discovered my neurodivergence, and it allowed me to work differently at work. And what happened is when I started having manager positions, I started discovering that I needed some more talent that were thinking differently, that would make this work differently. So in data, analytics, IT, I could not find the profiles that were required, that I needed to achieve the transformations that were required when I was at Chanel. And I started hiring because I knew about myself. And I think that's the first point, is knowing about yourself, working on yourself. And then I thought, my God, I need people like that. In fact, people that can drive change, that can deep dive, that can create new solutions. So I started hiring them, and it worked very well, but I had some issues with all the other departments. So I started working towards their inclusion, being kind of I would say a mentor for them, explaining them the rules and so on, and it worked perfectly well. And what I understood is, and it's really, this was my first big, let's say, learning moment in that journey of neurodiversity, is that organization didn't understand these profiles. And they could not see and foresee the amazing talents that were coming out of these profiles. So having done that, when I was in Chanel, I decided to dedicate my life to that, because I am absolutely convinced that we need more neurodivergent people. Of course, in the STEM industry, it's absolutely mandatory. And this is where it started. The neurodiversity journey started within big organizations like Google, Microsoft, but we need them in so many industries. And for that, today, we need to consider that 20% of the global population is neurodivergent. That's a lot. And that's not a lot at the same time, because neurodivergent people are a minority within the global population. Most of them, 80%, don't know about themselves. Anne told, Preston talked about her, the way she discovered her autism earlier. You have to consider that 80% of the women are not diagnosed before the age of 18 when they are on the autistic spectrum. That's a lot. So most of them, some of them, they struggle at work, some of them are unemployed. We estimate that 85% of people on the autistic spectrum are unemployed. So it's also a lot, and 35% of the global neurodivergent population is unemployed. So most of them struggle to get a job. And those who have a job, 60% of them would like to leave their job. Why? Because it's difficult, because they may be misunderstood, they may be at the right position, they may not have the inclusion adjustments that they need to perform efficiently. So that's really an important question. And we are in 2024, the world is changing. We need more people that think differently to build the world of tomorrow, or even of today. We are dealing with uncertainty. And today there was a study that has been done by the World Economic Forum in 2023, and they asked 800.
Sorry, Sabrina, could you just
sorry.
repeat who that was done by?
World Economic Forum. Sorry.
No, that's fine, don't worry.
In 2023. And what came out of this study is that the top two skills that were wanted, mostly wanted by organization, the two skills that were searched by organization were cognitive skills. So analytical and creative skills. And these are the skills that neurodivergent have. So my conviction was that, and is still, of course, and this is what I do with Singularity, is that at one point we are looking for these skills, and at the other side we have neurodivergent profiles that are unemployed, that are not satisfied with their job, that are misunderstood, and we need to build these bridges because the need doesn't match the requirements and the opposite. So that the difficulty with the subject, and most of us are concerned, is that the majority of neurodivergent profile, they don't know about themselves. They don't know they are neurodivergent. And when I go to conferences, what I noticed is that people, after the conference, they say, oh, I recognize myself. Maybe that could explain this and that could explain that. So the most important thing is awareness. Make people discover who they are. And then when they know, they can, of course, perform more efficiently, know what is good for them, what is not good for them, what are their specific needs. Because unless you know that you are neurodivergent, you don't know that you have specific needs because you don't know about yourself. But when you discover that, then you can start working on that with your organization. And to make it more easy for us to talk about the skills, maybe some of you in the audience may be unaware of that or concerned. I saw some people in the chat saying that they had kids and so on. I do have also 2 kids that are neurodivergent. But at the most important thing to talk about that, because when we speak about neurodivergence, we speak about people on the autistic spectrum. We speak about people that have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We talk about people that have learning disabilities, the Tourette syndrome, and also people that have overexcitabilities. And what I suggest and what I developed to be able to handle the skills of these profiles and make people recognize themselves when they don't know is talk about their overexcitabilities. Through this method, we can see what are the specific cognitive traits and cognitive abilities that these profiles have, and that can be, of course, recognized and used for the organization. And this overexcitabilities is a model that has been raised for the first time by a psychiatrist called Dabrowski, and it avoids labels for those who don't have them. But of course, it doesn't prevent from having a disability recognition when we have a diagnosis. But it's just a way about talking about the skills. So the first is the intellectual overexcitability. The person that are very logical, that seek to understand, and that deep dive very deep in the understanding. And what they do is they put a lot of energy towards that. And some people in the autistic spectrum, and most of them are very logical. So the intellectual intensity is very present in these profiles, and also with people with ADHD. The second overexcitability is imaginational. I am bursting with ideas. I have 5, as one told me one time, I have 10 screens opened at the same time. So I jump from one to the other. And I have a huge intensity on that. And this point is more about people that have ADHD. They have creativity, and it's been proven by lots of studies. And also people that have that are dyslexic. The motor overexcitability is the way people want to move. I need to move my body. That is the kind of profile that can't stay in a chair for 5 hours. This is a huge suffering. And people, of course, with ADHD are the first one. The hyperactivity part, the impulsivity, is related to this motor excitability. And what we can thrive when we talk about this from the skill approach, from the cognitive approach, is that for these people having a job where they move a lot, for instance, working in the events Organizing events is something that they love to do. They have also working in the building industry. I don't know if it's the word. They are also very good at that, because when they provide this, when this difference is used in their professional life, it gives them more, let's say, they blossom more in their work life, that rather than being seated. And of course, they may have adjustments when they have sitting positions. This is not the point. The point is about how we can use a difference as a strength and being in the right position by using its strengths, our strengths, perfectly. The emotional one, we don't speak about that one a lot. This is what we call the hypersensitivity profiles, and some of these profiles have these overexcitabilities, and these are the ones that are emotional sponges that grab all the emotions around them, sorry. And when they do that, they can be overwhelmed by their emotional intensity, and it can prevent them from working with others, from having, let's say, a mental health balance, because they can be affected by very little small things. But they are very good managers. They are very good at connecting with others. They have empathy. So this is an overexcitability, same, that can be used and be very efficient in an organization, because it connects people together. And the sensorial overexcitability, for this specificity, the senses are heightened. So, for example, this is what most of the people on the autistic spectrum report, is they have a very high sensitivity to the sound. So they would rather work in a quiet environment, because what can be a small sound for someone can be something very high and unbearable for someone on the autistic spectrum, because they do have these overexcitabilities that can be used, of course, as a strength. Because I have a girl in the autistic spectrum. She is working in the sound industry. She's working on stages, and she's the one taking care of the sound. But I can tell you, she can detect the small little imperfection that, of course, I and most of the people don't. So it can be a burden for sure if you're working in an open space, but it also can be a strength when it's used in a way that is where it is valuable. So these 5 overexcitabilities, they are not all the people do have them, but can you imagine, you as professionals in the industry, what it can bring as a difference in your teams to have these people that have these strengths, depending, of course, on the job mission, as I told you already. But imagine how you can unlock that to the greatest, because first it gives these people dignity, because for people that are neurodivergent, it's very important to be in their strengths, to work in their talent zone, because their effort zone can be very painful for them. As I told you, imagine you put someone on the autistic spectrum in a noisy environment, and I have so many testimonials on that. They cannot concentrate on their work. It is not possible. So if they are put in an effort zone during the whole day, they won't be able to perform efficiently. So the idea here is, when we talk about neurodivergent, we have to integrate the reasonable adjustments that have to be done for these people to be able to perform and do their work in conditions of equity. It is not making a gift for them. This is not that. Is that if they don't have these accommodations, they cannot work. So they cannot perform efficiently. So it's up to all of us to be able to recognize their difference, respect it, use their difference, because this is a divergence. So this is a way they are looking at things from a different angle. They are not looking at in the same angle as others. So what do we do with that? Do we say, oh, we need to stick into the norm? That's the way we do. Their point of view is not good. Or shall we say, my God, what is this point of view? What are they bringing to the table? What does their difference bring to the table? So that's very important to consider that. And I hope all of you will be ambassadors, and I think I come to the end, for these people, to recognize them. And of course, we are working to support organizations to unlock the potential of these amazing or STEMAZING talents. So please don't hesitate to reach if needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Wow, that was incredible. I think that model with the excitability model, the different aspects of that is so helpful to have that in mind to help people raise their awareness of what their individual needs might be, but also to have a conversation with your employer about what your needs might be. We've got some questions in the chat. So there's 2 questions really relating to the interview process for making adjustments to make an interview process more inclusive. And how do maybe smaller companies, small organizations that don't have a huge budget or huge HR departments, how can they make an interview? How do we sort of filter this information down to those smaller companies, and how can they make that interview process more inclusive?
So for the, yes, interview is the first, of course, filter. Because this is where usually these talents don't get into the company, because the recruitment process is not adapted for their profiles, unless, of course, they are over-adapted profiles, and there are some that are like that, and that can manage to do the interviews, let's say the normal interviews. But for neurodivergent, the idea for the interview is to be adapted to a specific neurotype. So what you can do as an organization is look at first your need. What is your need? Because don't put an autistic profile in a very social environment and needing to move and being surrounded by so many noise and so on. So you need first, as what my advice is always, look at the position and define which kind of profile you would need. Offer adjustments in the recruitment process. What you can suggest is tell in the job posting that ask the people, and this is a diversity tip, if they have special requirements or needs for the interview process. So that's another way of letting the profile explain his own specific need. And then we know that in these profiles, some they don't, and for the autistic one, they don't really handle the oral, the discussion. They prefer written communication. And also they prefer things to be anticipated, because they don't like change, surprises. In an interview, you can be surprised, you can be challenged, and you're not getting the best of the person when you do that. So to make them feel safe, you can anticipate, ask for them to be able to provide answers to the question, written answers. So that's another way of accommodating, for instance, for this neurotype. And the thing is, I think what I recommend always is to be able to not in the job posting, don't put too many superlatives like I'm looking for the best person for this, because these people neurodivergent, they will feel rejected. They will say, okay, this job is not for me, because they will stick into the job posting and they will say, okay, I don't have this, I don't have this, I don't have this. So I cannot fill up this job. So I'm not going even to send my resume. So be careful with the words also, if it's an advice, and try to stick into the skills that are required. Don't put too many superlatives, so that it's quite logical, concrete, and it allows them to feel that they may be good for this position, because they will just filter themselves and say, okay, this is not for me. So these are some tips.
So much.
Sorry,
No, that's brilliant. Thank you, Sabrina. You are obviously such an expert on this. You have got so much knowledge to share, and we definitely need to get you back for a longer webinar so that you can share.
I haven't been too long, I hope.
That would be amazing. But thank you so much. I don't know if you've got a chance to reply to some of the comments and questions in the chat, because there's a few for you there. And everyone, I recommend you follow Sabrina, connect in with her. She's got so much valuable knowledge to share. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Everyone loving that mental image of sort of effort zone versus in the, what was it? It was effort
talent zone and effort zone.
Absolutely, those 2 different zones. So helpful to have that as an analogy. Thank you.
Thank you.
So over to our last speaker on our virtual stage today. Last but not least.
Sorry, Alex. just going to take 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah, Emma, you're doing a sterling job. Thank you.
Just to explain to anyone who might not know that usually for this sort of thing, you'd have 2 interpreters who would co-work, because generally we need about
That's
20
an
minutes.
inclusive top tip for us next time. We
Yeah, but
definitely have that.
processing time is normally about 20 minutes max. So I'm just going to take 5 minutes and then
Absolutely. No, you're doing an incredible job. Thank you so much. We are going to move on to Meshi, who's our final speaker of the day, and really to kind of sum up and to help us close with this key message about the power of allyship. And I remember a talk that I went to years and years ago, where there was a term that we can all be majority allies to someone. So no matter what aspects of diversity we're in the minority, we can all be majority allies to someone. And so I think the power of allyship is such an important topic to close our webinar on today. So Meshi, over to you.
Hi, Alex. Yeah, I'm just trying. I've got a lot already. I feel like every speaker before now has spoken to me on some level, which kind of comes to the point of allyship, I think. But I'll start off with an introduction. My name is Meshi Taka. As in the first slide, I am an associate director with Waterman Aspen, but I'm also the lead for Project Groundwater Northumbria, which is part of the FSIP, the Flood and Coastal Innovation Program, which is being managed by the Environment Agency, which is all around driving innovation and tackling status quos and all towards a climate change future. I am a chartered civil engineer, a fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers, as well as a member of WES, so INWED Day, woohoo. And I think one of the things for me, I've been taking notes as we've kind of gone through the day. A lot of the things that have been discussed today resonated. Parenthood. I'm mother to a 5.5-year-old boy. The conversation on neurodiversity did hit a nerve, because again, I think when my son was experiencing challenges at school, inability to sit still is a big one for him. And I started exploring whether those were signs of neurodiversity. And there was a bit of self-reflection as well, because a lot of his traits were traits I've carried all my life. But as the statistics will show you, women tend to be undiagnosed till much later in life. And I think a lot of the conversation around whether it's the skills gap or it's normalizing some of the challenges we experience that can impact our performance in the workplace is around the stigma that sometimes linked to it. And I think my personal learning on neurodiversity has been one of taking what I used to describe as a child as my weirdness, because that was how I coped with it, and realizing that actually it has been a superpower for me throughout my life. But the ability to understand much better what it is can also help my personal well-being, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's at home. And on top of that, as a parent, it can help support my son going forward. But you've heard some of the stats today. I think, Paul, your conversation there on the skills gap and the fact that almost 50% of employers are reporting they can't find the skills in the marketplace. But then in the workplace, it's about 45% are still reporting a skills gap. And something like 96% of all of these companies are basically saying that it's affecting performance. In my world, I work in water environment. We have a massive climate change challenge in front of us, and we need the passion, the talent, the skills to be able to tackle it. And we just can't find the people. And I think our speakers talked about the language, I think, of how we represent what being an engineer is like. And those are all really important points, because we're all doing great work, but we're doing great work in all these different spaces. And that's where the allyship comes into play. That's where pulling our powers together can make us one gigantic superpower. And I think for my slide, I kept it quite simple. I went to the dictionary, because like you do, what does the dictionary say? What defines allyship as? And it says it's a noun, as the active support for rights of a minority or marginalized group, without being a member of it. And I think for many people, we belong in one or more of these spaces. And there are others who belong in some of the bigger groups. And what we're trying to do is put our humanity at the center of it. And I like to quote Bill Clinton, not that he had made a really good speech some years back. And he talked about our differences. Our differences matter, but our common humanity matters more. And I feel like when we are speaking on these spaces, and everything from neurodiversity, or being a woman in engineering, or being a parent, or being a carer, or living with disabilities, when we come from a space of humanity, when we make the space in our world to consider the experience, the lived experience of the other, that would help us work towards a more stronger future. Now, with regards to what that means, I think normalizing some of these conversations is a start. Normalizing the uncomfortable conversations. I mean, for me, things like menopause. I think a lot of people, when you use that word, they try hard not to flinch, and that is telling. Childcare. So you come back from maternity or parental leave, and everybody wants to hear or see the cute picture. But do they want to listen to you talk about the uncomfortable challenges you expect? And actually part of that is just having that conversation. And the more you have it, the more normal it becomes. And that informs, I think, those around you and what you're going through. I think us Brits have this thing about stiff upper lip, which it's meant to suggest poise and, you know what I mean? It's all good, but I think sometimes it helps to just be you and to let people in to see that behind this person who can kick butt at work and it's brilliant and everything else is a real life human being who sometimes can be impacted by their home life, and making space for that conversation as well. And that then rolls into things like safe spaces. So in our workplaces, do we have these safe spaces where you can talk with no judgment? You can kind of communicate what you're going through and expect support, as opposed to another red mark against your name for being problematic or disruptive. And the relatable, I think Maria talked about being relatable. I think that's part of that as well. It creates that related where you're looking at a person not as a statistic or as a number or as a fee earning or revenue making potential, but as a real person who wants to do their best work, who wants to bring their best life and make you succeed. But like most things in life, if you're not willing to invest in people, why do you expect them to invest in you? It is a two-way street. Going back to the SAT, Alex, I think you talked about Engineering UK's report in May about the dip in women in engineering, a number that initially 16.5%, not really great compared to the STEM average, which was I think 24% in the earlier presentation. So 16.5% for engineering is slightly below the already low standard for women in engineering. But then that's dropped to 15.7% as of the survey was June last year, but reported in May this month. And what's really interesting about that stat is that that's due to women leaving in a particular age group, 35 to 44. And that's where I sit. And a personal narration for me is a story that something I went through a few months ago. I happened to be sat next to an employer a few months back, and the conversation around why the industry is struggling to retain women of a certain stage and age. And I told them about my journey as somebody who had a child in kind of the late 30s and how I struggled with going back to work. I think Nikki touched on that in her presentation. I talked about the feeling like an outsider in a space where I had thrived, I'd done really well, and trying to find my footing again. And it was hard to navigate that. And that I was somebody who had considered walking away. And I was lucky enough to have friends and networks, people I reached out to that made a difference. that just kept me in long enough to see the wood for the trees. And what I found interesting is, although they'd asked the question, they immediately rejected my lived experience. And I think the reason I bring that conversation up is just realizing that there are people out there that won't even bother to engage. They would just walk away because of that resistance to listening to an uncomfortable truth. And it wasn't blaming anyone. It was just saying this was the reality of what I went through. It was not something I anticipated. It wasn't something I considered when I was going on my maternity leave, but it was something I came back to. And it took a lot for me to stay committed to an industry that, in my lived experience, did not value my presence. And I feel like in the context of allyship, because there are many of us all with particular, or whether intersectional or different needs that make us other or underrepresented, that if we can come together, we can create that collective space to recognize change needs to be made, but also to put the power behind it to drive some of these changes. And earlier on, Nikki talked about lobbying and getting the numbers behind us. That's how we do it. We start first by collecting ourselves and working together to support each other. A few weeks ago, I was quite lucky. Well, quite lucky. I'm a bit of a social media enthusiast, should we say. So I was on TikTok one day and I saw one of those GIFs. And this particular one, it made me laugh because you had two booths, and one booth said, people that want change. And the second booth said, people that, people that want change and people that want to change. So a slight play on words there. And there was a queue. And the queue for people that want change was out the door. It was as long as anything. And the queue for people that want to change was exactly 0. And it was funny because it was witty, but it was also sad because it is true that we're all very good at talking about what we'd like to see and what we need, but actually we're also the same people power that need to be part of the change. And I think that if we can all start in our small areas, and it could be reaching out to somebody that you've not engaged with before, in the workplace, there's always that other person, to bring them in, to have a conversation, to get to know them more. One of your mottos there, Alex, be curious, be curious about others, learn more about them, because actually once you do that, that's that humanity journey again. And I think that conversation around attracting the skills and the visible representation and being able to say, yes, I'm a woman, I'm a female engineer, I'm also somebody of African descent, and I might be neurodiverse. I definitely have the traits. I mean, when to be fair, the two neurodiverse conversations, but when Sabrina was describing the kind of somebody who can't sit still and really all about the high intense energy, and it's not the first time someone's pointed out to me. And I think for me, it's still a journey, but it's actually talking about it. Because am I diagnosed? I am not. But enough people have said, and this is because we're having this conversation on neurodiversion in a more normalized and public way, that you do have some neurodivergent traits. And I was like, oh, cool. I just thought that was me, but it is me. And it can also be neurodiversity in my DNA. So it's all around just creating those spaces where we can just be our real selves, but be accepted for it. Training, I think a lot of our employers promoting training in workplaces is also part of what we need to do to get the change that we need. So yes, talking about it and being open and saying to my employee, listen, this is how I see the world and this is how I work best. But that consistent training helps with creating the systems where our workplaces can be a bit more inclusive for us. Whether you're somebody who, in a situation like this, you might want to have earphones because you don't want to be distracted by all the kind of environmental noise, or perhaps like me, when I want to be kind of laser focused, actually music helps me just tunnel in. Either way, you get the best out of either of us, and that's what we're trying to do here. And really, I think ultimately we're all trying to kind of get to that common goal. And as somebody who has been passionate about engineering before I understood what it is, I come from a family. My dad was a civil and structural engineer. So for me, it was quite normal. It just was bridges, roads, pipes. I grew up seeing it. It turns out I loved STEM anyways, but it was just normal for me. To people that are looking at the world today and going, I want to make a difference. I want the solution to climate change, but I don't recognize the career pathway to get me there. We have a duty to make engineering and science and technology more approachable, more relatable, because engineering does shape the world around us, and everybody deserves a chance to influence it.
Thank you so much, Meshi. Incredible takeaways there. Again, so much love for what you're saying in the chat, and people saying, wow, like incredible sort of sound bites and top tips that help raise our own individual awareness, and also, like you say, put humanity at the center of what we do. Honestly, I love that, having that, remembering that we are all humans and that we can all do something to help each other and actually be active. That gif about, yeah, we all want to see the change, but do we want to be the change? That is the big thing, isn't it? So Meshi, because we're short on time, maybe you could have a look through the chat in the next couple minutes and just respond to some of those points in there, because yeah, clearly a lot of people have taken a lot from what you've said there. Thank you so much. And that just leaves me really to close the event. And perfectly, Meshi has already said it all and summed it up brilliantly. And I love, Meshi, how you managed to reference all the different speakers of the day as well, bringing this all together in that power of allyship. But I think, as I said right at the beginning, let's make events like International Women in Engineering Day and any other day where we're celebrating differences, make them proactive, not passive. This cannot be performative and just a nice to have. This is something that can lead to real action if we as individuals make that happen. So be the change we need to see. What are you as individuals going to take away from everything you've heard today? And even if you just take away one thing and put that one thing into action, that will make a difference. And imagine then collectively, if everyone in our STEM industries was doing that, what difference it could make. And we are in STEMAZING, obviously, we are trying to help you do this. I'm so grateful of the people that get involved in our STEMAZING initiatives. We have historically, over the last 4 years, focused largely on gender diversity, but we recognize, because of our values around inclusion, just how much intersectionality we have in our STEMAZING community and the people that get involved in what we do. And so to build on that, we are very excited to be launching our STEMAZING community, which is going to be a new part of STEMAZING, which welcomes all genders. It welcomes everyone in STEM, whether you have STEM qualifications or not. You are in STEM in some capacity. You are part of this ecosystem, and we all need to come together to keep having conversations like we've had today, learning from each other's lived experiences, actually listening and learning from that, and sharing what we know works, but also creating the safe space to share challenges. And we obviously are going to be linking this largely to STEM outreach with young people as well, and taking on board all the tips from Maria about the importance of connection and relatability, and linking that into our work with STEMAZING kids in primary schools. So if you want to be a part of that community, have a look. Sue's put the link in the chat. We haven't officially publicly launched it yet, so you are the first to know about it. So take a look at that, and we'd love to see you there on the inside. That just leaves me to say thank you so much to all of our speakers. My goodness me, what an incredible lineup we've had. I'm so grateful for your time. All of these speakers have just got something so powerful to say, and I feel privileged that they have used this platform today to share their powerful messages. Thank you to everyone. A huge thank you to Emma for doing an incredible job of signing throughout the whole webinar. Thank you again to our sponsors, Everrose and Pointer Group. Your support is just immense. We love it. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us. You have been an incredible audience. Thank you for all the love and comments and insights and information you've put in the chat. Let's keep the conversation going. Everyone link in together and have a wonderful rest of INWED celebrations, everyone. Thank you so much. Take care.